Welcome to episode 7 of the Realised Mindfulness podcast, where today our theme is growing happiness. We've lots of valuable content to explore together this episode, and we'll begin our contemplation of happiness by considering 3 different routes to happiness and reflecting on how our core values can contribute to a sense of joy and fulfilment in our lives. Our short practice today is a silver lining contemplation, which invites us to reflect on how the challenges that we've overcome in life have impacted us in a positive way. In the second half of the episode, we'll meet 4 friends for life, attitudes and ways of being which can support our well-being and flourishing. We'll also revisit the power of gratitude and end the session with a beautiful practice which invites us to revisit the good by savouring a pleasant experience through all of our senses. Before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. The Mindfulness-based Compassionate Living course, which is the inspiration for this season, was developed as a support to deepening our mindfulness practice, and it assumes that you've already spent some time building mindful foundations. So, if you're new to mindfulness, you may find it helpful to start by listening to season 1 of the podcast. And if you're ready to explore mindful compassion, let me acknowledge that the MBCL course is rich and deep, and this podcast is in no way a replacement for attending an 8-week course. Rather, it is intended as either an introduction, or a companion, or a refresher for the course. And if you're interested in finding out more, I've included some helpful links in the show notes. So, without further ado, let's continue with today's episode as we explore what contributes to growing happiness. In his book Authentic Happiness, the psychologist Martin Seligman, oft recognised as the father of positive psychology, offers us 3 gateways to happiness. The first gateway is the pleasant life, what's sometimes called hedonic happiness, the experiencing of pleasant emotions and sensory joy. This is the sort of happiness that we commonly associate with, for example, going away on holiday, so enjoying delicious food, beautiful sights, sunshine and sea. The second gateway to happiness is the engaged life. This involves experiencing nourishing relationships, recognizing our interconnectivity. And the third gateway is the meaningful life. Here we're living in congruence with our core values, and we have a sense of a larger purpose in life. The second and third gateways could be described as eudaimonic pleasure. That's more about connecting with meaning and purpose in our lives. Perhaps the key to happiness is finding a balance between all 3 aspects. And of course, some activities can bring us joy across all 3 areas. For example, my work with the horses offers sensory pleasure. I love the sensation of stroking them or taking them for a walk and soaking in the forest sights, listening to the clip-clop of their feet. That's a classic example of the pleasant life. I also really value the relationship that we have together, and caring for them gives me pleasure. That's an example of the engaged life. And of course, I find the work that we do together, teaching mindfulness and offering equine facilitated learning, very meaningful and rewarding. This is a classic example of the meaningful life. You may want to reflect over the next week or so as to how the different gateways to happiness show up in your own life. Perhaps one takes precedence over the others. And are there any ways that you might like to invite a new sense of balance? One of the things that can help contribute to an engaged and meaningful life is a sense of clarity around our core values. Values have a vitalizing power in our life, and they can contribute to psychological flexibility and well-being, and help direct us and keep us on track, a bit like a North Star. In acceptance and commitment therapy, developed by Stephen Hayes, it's acknowledged that in following our values, we meet both our pain and our joy. And, conversely, in our pain and our joy, we find our values. In a moment, I'll guide a contemplation which invites us to think about how that may be true in our own lives. But first, I'd like to offer a story. So, an invitation to get comfortable, to settle into mindful awareness, tuning in to the sensations of the body resting on the chair or the feet firmly planted on the floor. Maybe taking a few conscious breaths. And when you're comfortable, I'll begin. Once upon a time, a water bearer in India had 2 large pots. The pots hung on each end of a pole which he carried across his neck. Now one of the pots had a crack in it, and while the other pot was perfect and always delivered a full portion of water at the end of the long walk from the stream to his teacher's house, the cracked pot arrived only half full. For 2 years this went on daily, with the water bearer delivering only 1.5 full pots of water to his teacher's house each morning. Of course, the perfect pot was proud of its accomplishments. It knew it was perfect for the purpose it was made for. But the poor cracked pot was ashamed of his own imperfection, and miserable that it was only able to accomplish half of what it had been made to do. After 2 years of what it perceived to be bitter failure, it spoke to the water bearer one day by the stream. The cracked pot confided in him. "I'm ashamed of myself, and I want to apologize to you." The water bearer asked, "Why? What are you ashamed of?" And the pot replied, "For these past 2 years, I'm able to deliver only half of my load, because this crack in my side causes the water to leak out all the way back to your teacher's house. Because of my flaws, you don't get full value for your efforts." The water bearer felt sorry for the old cracked pot, and in his compassion he said, "As we return to the teacher's house, I want you to notice all the beautiful flowers along the path." So, as they went up the hill, the old cracked pot took notice of the sun warming the beautiful wild flowers on the side of the path, and this cheered him up somewhat. But at the end of the trail, the cracked pot still felt sad, because it had leaked out half of its load, and so again it apologized to the bearer for its failure. The bearer said to the pot, "Did you notice that there were flowers only on your side of the path, but not on the other pot's side? That's because I've always known about your flaw, and I took advantage of it. I planted flower seeds on your side of the path, and every day while we walk back from the stream, you've watered the seeds. For 2 years, I've been able to pick these beautiful flowers to decorate my teacher's table. Without you being just the way you are, he would not have had this beauty to grace his house. So let's pause for a moment and take an opportunity to reflect on how the story resonates with us. Personally, I'm reminded of the Japanese art of kintsukuroi, where a broken pot is repaired with gold or silver filigree, understanding that the piece is all the more beautiful for its cracks. I wonder how our own cracks facilitate our beauty and what we contribute to this world. Maybe, to offer the words of the Persian poet Rumi, the wound is the place where the light enters you. The next exercise is a contemplation from week 6 of the Mindfulness-Based Compassionate Living course. It invites us to shift towards acceptance, embrace our past pain, and see the silver lining of a dark period of our lives. So, maybe taking some time to reconnect with mindful awareness, sensing into the body on the chair, the feet on the floor, and if it feels okay, tuning into the flow of the breath. Inviting a sense of relaxation and noticing how this shows up in the body, the thoughts, and the emotional landscape. Every time we've gone through, or maybe are in the midst of going through, a difficult time in our lives, we can reflect on the hidden treasure of our suffering by reflecting on the following questions. So, taking good care of yourself and seeing which questions resonate, and always knowing you can come back to the stabilizing sense of grounding, body on chair, feet on floor, or body in movement if you're walking. Tuning into a soothing breathing rhythm. So, remembering a challenge in your life, one that it feels okay to call to mind right now. And as you think of this challenge and remember it clearly, reflecting on what good came out of it. What did you learn from the experience that maybe you wouldn't have learned otherwise? And is there maybe a little lotus flower that grew out of the mud? And if you choose, thinking about a challenge that you're faced with right now, what would you wish for yourself to come out of this challenge? And what do you hope you learn when you look back on it later? Maybe you even want to pause the podcast right now and take some time to note down your responses. Or maybe you prefer to let the questions ripple in your subconscious and see how the answers emerge over time. I know personally that this reflection helped me to recognise that if it hadn't been for my depression, I'd have probably been less motivated to stick with my mindfulness practice in the early days. I'd have also been less motivated to continue learning and practicing. and maybe less passionate about sharing the benefits of mindfulness with others. And of course, that would have changed the trajectory of both my work and my personal life. Maybe you can see similar ways that your challenges have paved a positive pathway for you. So let's end our reflection time with a beautiful haiku from the Japanese samurai Masahide. My barn having burnt to the ground, I can see the moon more completely. Let's move on now to meet 4 friends for life. These friends are the way that the MBCL course offers teachings around what Buddhist psychology calls the Brahma Viharas, or the 4 illimitables. These qualities are illimitable for a number of reasons. First, they're not limited by ego perspective, by me or mine or you and yours. They apply to all of us and do not exclude anybody. They can also be practiced without limit. In the MBCL course, we take a secular approach to these qualities and have christened them the 4 friends for life. They are compassion, kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Let's take a look at each of them in turn. Compassion is focused on the alleviation of pain and suffering, both our own and that of other people. Compassion is the antidote to nastiness and cruelty, and to schadenfreude, that sense of taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. There are many practices in the mindfulness-based compassionate living course that offer us a gateway into compassion. Some of them are short practices, such as the breathing space with compassion or the self-compassion mantra. There are also longer practices which invite us to connect with the qualities of compassion, such as the compassionate companion and embodying compassion. And there are also practices which specifically target relating to challenge and to suffering in our lives. For example, compassionately relating to desire and the compassionate breathing practice. I've offered guided versions of all these meditations in previous episodes of the podcast, so you can explore them for yourself in your own time. One area of compassion that we begin to explore in more depth in session 6 of the MBCL course is forgiveness, both forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. I want to signpost that we won't explore this today, but maybe it'll be a bonus episode in the future. But for now, if you're interested in finding out more, then of course you can find the practices and the theory behind them in the workbook, or you could attend a group course or one-to-one coaching with me or another qualified teacher. So moving on to the next friend for life, which is kindness. Kindness is focused on promoting happiness and well-being. Again, we can direct kindness towards ourselves or to others. Kindness is very much a general purpose attitude, or an all-weather friend. It's also the antidote to hatred and resentment. Specific practices that we explore together in the MBCL course include the breathing space with kindness, the loving kindness practices, including walking with kindness, and the kindness practices for the body. We'll share some of these beautiful practices in future episodes of the podcast, so do keep listening. The third friend for life is sympathetic joy. Sympathetic joy is focused on sharing and appreciating joy and good fortune. It's the antidote to envy and jealousy. Specific practices that we share in the MBCL program include taking a pleasure walk and revisiting the good, which we'll share together today. And there's also a specific sympathetic joy meditation. The final friend for life is equanimity. Equanimity is open-minded and warm-hearted and free from judgment. It's the antidote to arrogance, conceit, and over-involvement. Some of the practices that support developing this quality in the MBCL program include the horse whisperer, the river of life, and the equanimity meditation. We'll explore equanimity in depth in my conversation with Fritz Costa in episode 8, including the opportunity to share a beautiful horse whisperer practice guided by Fritz. So do tune in then. In mindfulness-based compassionate living, we offer a helpful metaphor to help us understand how to practically bring these 4 friends into everyday life. Maybe you can picture an old-fashioned weather barometer. My grandparents used to have one hanging in their hallway. It had a face a bit like a clock and a dial which would point to what we could expect from the weather that day, telling us whether to prepare for sunshine or for showers. We can imagine that our 4 friends make up the clock face of the barometer. In fact, equanimity is almost like the holder of the barometer. It helps to keep everything in place and represents a sense of balance and stability in the face of life's changing weather patterns. Without equanimity, it's difficult for the other qualities to be authentically present. When the weather's cold or cloudy or wet, the dial's pointing more towards compassion. Here, perhaps care and gentleness are most called for in the face of the challenging weather. When the sun shines blazing, it's more of a sense of sympathetic joy. The weather inside and out is sunny and cheerful. And when the dial's around the middle somewhere, kind of a sense of sunshine coming optimistically through the clouds, we have a sense of kindness. Fair weather is on the horizon. We can use this metaphor of the barometer to help us tune in to what sort of practice may be most supportive for us on any particular day. If our own internal weather pattern is a bit grey or cloudy, maybe a compassion practice could be supportive. And if we're feeling out of balance and thrown about by the ups and downs of life, maybe a quality of equanimity could help us find solid ground again. If we're noticing we're feeling envious of a good friend, maybe a sympathetic joy practice could help us appreciate their good fortune. And if we simply want to connect with a sense of common humanity, then a kindness practice may help us spread kindness and compassion, both for others and also recognizing that we too are part of nature and the human race. The final idea I'd like to share in today's episode is that of savouring and revisiting the good. Psychologist Rick Hanson writes about this beautifully in his book Hardwiring Happiness. He offers us an acronym, HEAL, which stands for H-E-A-L, having an experience, enriching it, that's really bringing it to life, absorbing it. So letting the goodness soak in. And there's an optional final stage which gives us the opportunity to link the positive experiences to more challenging ones. This can be particularly helpful if we're working at loosening up an old identity which is perhaps no longer serving us or so helpful, in a similar way to we explored in the previous episode. Rick Hanson suggests that if we want to get the full benefit from a positive experience, we really need to focus on savouring it for around 10 to 20 seconds. And he suggests that this is actually much longer than most of us normally allow for a positive experience. You may remember from earlier episodes that our brains are hardwired to pay attention to the negative and to discount or not really notice the positive. The good news is that we can redress this balance with a bit of effort. If you'd like to put this into practice and try the first 3 steps of Heal for yourself, then do carry on listening, as we're going to explore exactly this today in our longer practice as we revisit the good. Researcher Barbara Fredrickson, in her book Positivity, explores happiness ratios. She asks how many positive experiences we need to balance out a negative experience. Her research suggests that the tipping point may be around 3 to 1, but actually the most beneficial ratio would most likely be higher than that, perhaps even 5 or 6 positive experiences to every 1 negative one. Maybe take a moment to reflect about how that manifests in your own life. I know when I read that fact, it was quite salutary. It made me really reflect on taking in the good more consciously. I've talked before about my relationship with depression and my tendencies to be a bit of a gloomy Eeyore. Recognising this and noticing when my internal weather barometer may be pointing more towards the cloudy, I've been able to introduce more compassion practices alongside more savouring practices. In fact, I've made a pleasure walk a part of my daily routine, and I find that in starting the day in this way, in the company of our family dog Rusty, it helps to put me in a positive mindset for the day ahead. So, before we move into our revisiting the good practice, let's just recap what we've covered in today's episode. We began by exploring 3 different routes to happiness: the pleasant life, the engaged life, and the meaningful life. And then we considered how our core values can contribute to a sense of joy and fulfilment in our lives, and shared a story about the cracked water pot, leading into a contemplation to help us appreciate the silver lining of some of life's challenges. We then spent some time getting to know the 4 friends for life, attitudes and ways of being which can support our flourishing. And we revisited the power of gratitude and savouring. So, to set the scene for our longer practice of the episode, let's share a short poem from Donna Ashworth, which will lead us into our revisiting the good practice. An invitation to savour a pleasant experience through all of our senses. So settle in as I share the words from Joy Chose You by Donna Ashworth. Joy does not arrive with a fanfare on a red carpet strewn with the flowers of a perfect life. Joy sneaks in as you pour a cup of coffee, watching the sunlight hit your favourite tree just right. And you usher joy away because you're not ready for her. Your house is not as it should be for such a distinguished guest. But joy cares nothing for your messy home, or your bank balance, or your waistline. You see, joy is supposed to slither through the cracks of your imperfect life. That's how joy works. You cannot truly invite her. You can only be ready when she appears, and hug her with meaning, because in this very moment, joy chose you. So, an invitation to find a comfortable space where you won't be disturbed for the next 20 minutes or so, as we share a savouring practice to help us grow happiness by cultivating the qualities of appreciation and gratitude. This is a revisiting the good practice. It invites us to savour a recent pleasant experience with all of our senses. So, choosing a comfortable posture, maybe sitting, or maybe even standing or in movement. Taking some moments to arrive in mindful awareness now. Noticing what sensations are calling for your attention in the body. What thoughts might be present. And the emotional landscape right now. And as best you can, creating space for it all. And maybe adopting a gentle attitude of softening to any areas of tension in the body. An attitude of soothing to any fragile areas of the emotional landscape. And a gentle attitude of allowing to whatever thoughts are here, without needing to push them away or cling on to them. In this way, we can adopt an attitude of soften, soothe, and allow. So maybe resting the attention on a chosen anchor, perhaps body on chair, feet on floor. Or if you prefer, coming to a soothing breathing rhythm now. Maybe letting the rhythm of the breath just naturally deepen and slow. Following the breath all the way in. And all the way out. Allowing yourself to be soothed and settled by the rhythm of your own breath. And now an invitation to think back to a recent situation when you saw something that filled you with pleasure and joy. Perhaps it was the smiling face of a dear one, or the beauty of nature, a particular landscape, a work of art, or the simplicity of children playing in the park, or something quite different. So So allowing yourself to be surprised by the gift of your imagination and your remembrance as you call to mind this sight that filled you with joy. And really imagining that you're seeing it again right now, seeing what you saw then, noticing the colours and shapes, the vibrancy. Really tuning into the details that touched you with joy. And noticing what's here in the mind and body now as you reconnect with that experience. What are you noticing in your face, in the region of your heart, and the rest of the body? And now remembering a situation when you heard something that filled you with joy. Maybe it's the same experience or maybe a new one. Perhaps it was the sound of a loved one's voice, a singing bird, the wind gently rustling leaves, rolling waves or a trickling stream, beautiful music, or the sound of laughter. And imagine that you're hearing now what you heard then. Tuning in to what struck a chord of joy inside you. Exploring the details of the experience. And noticing now in the body and in the heart the impact of tuning in to this joyful sound. And then moving on to an experience of smelling something that filled you with joy. Was the smell of a special food, a lovely perfume, a fragrance in nature, or maybe the scent of a dear pet? Imagine inhaling deeply, smelling now what you smelled then. And noticing how it affects you in your nose and throughout your whole body. And then imagining in detail a situation where the sense of taste was a source of joy for you. Remembering a time when you were really able to appreciate and savour a favourite food, maybe a piece of fresh fruit, local produce, or something special that somebody had prepared for you. And imagining now that you're tasting and savouring what you enjoyed then. Experiencing it on your tongue once more. Savouring mouth. What are you noticing right now in your mouth? And in the rest of your body? And now exploring a situation where the sense of touch was a source of joy. Maybe you touched something warm or soft, like stroking the hair of a loved one or a dear pet. Maybe it was the feeling of warm sun rays on your skin, or a cool breeze, or feeling grains of warm sand on your feet as you walked along a beach. Exploring the sensations now that you felt then. What sensations are you noticing on the surface of your skin? The entirety of your body. Your face. And the region of your heart. And you may want to take some moments now to explore other joyful experiences through these doors of your 5 sense gateways. Savouring what you saw, sounds, smells, tastes, and the sense of touch. And also noticing the accompanying body sensations. And any thoughts or feelings that may accompany the practice. And these 5 senses that we've just explored connect us with the outer world. And we can also distinguish a 6th sense, the mind with which we can think our thoughts and feel our emotions. So an invitation now to remember a situation where this sense of our inner world was a channel of joyful experience for us. Maybe you were struck by a beautiful thought or a powerful insight. An experience of, now I get it. Now I understand. Maybe you were touched by a metaphor, a story or a poem, a film you watched recently. So imagining how you experienced then what you're experiencing now. What was it that touched you? And how is it affecting you now as you reconnect with it? And allowing for all experiences to be present. Paradoxically, this practice of revisiting the good can sometimes evoke feelings of sadness or a sense of grief or aching for what we've lost, or a desire for what's missing. So if this is the case for you, then acknowledging this with compassion and appreciating this as part of the experience. So maybe offering yourself a compassionate wish. May I acknowledge what's present? May I be kind and gentle with myself? May I allow space for these feelings to be present? And maybe when you're ready, creating space once more to reconnect with a recent joyful experience through all of the sense gateways. And knowing that we can find joy anywhere if we take the opportunity to open the doors of our sense gateways, to mindfully notice, to rest in the soothing system. It can be possible even to find lightness in the moments of darkness. Touching into moments that can lighten our hearts with joy. And you may like to close this practice by placing a hand on the heart, or both hands one on top of the other, and taking some moments to appreciate yourself for taking the time for this practice. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. It's my heartfelt wish that this podcast, in its own small way, contributes to the spread of mindfulness and compassion in our world. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and follow it. And if you have friends who may be interested, please share it with them too. And if you'd like to find out more about me and my work, including the mindfulness-based compassionate living group course and one-to-one coaching, you can do so at my website, www.realisemindfulness.com. Please do keep listening, and if you'd like to keep in touch, it would be wonderful to hear from you. So, until next time, wishing you ease and kindness in the flow of life.